Episode 6. The rehearsals for the Singhania Anniversary Gala were in full swing. The grand rehearsal hall buzzed with energy as dancers practiced tirelessly under Naina's watchful eye. She moved through the space like a maestro, correcting postures, refining gestures, and encouraging her troupe with a mix of sharp critiques and gentle reassurances. Aditya sat at the back of the hall, observing the scene with quiet intensity. Despite his position as the host of the event, he found himself spending more time at the rehearsals than in his office. He told himself it was to ensure the production's success, but deep down, he knew there was another reason. His gaze often strayed to Naina. She was a force of nature, commanding, passionate, and utterly captivating. Her every movement carried purpose. Her every word vibrated with conviction. And though she tried to maintain her professional demeanor, Aditya had caught fleeting moments when her guard slipped. A quick smile, a soft laugh, or the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. He didn't just admire her. He was drawn to her in ways he couldn't explain. One afternoon, during a short break, Aditya approached Naina as she reviewed choreography notes. "Do you ever stop working?" he asked, his voice light with teasing. Naina looked up, startled by his approach. "When you're responsible for other people's success, you don't have the luxury of taking breaks." Aditya leaned against the mirrored wall, his expression thoughtful. "That sounds like something I'd say." "Maybe we're not so different," Naina replied, her tone tinged with irony. "Except you're building an empire, and I'm just trying to keep my school from falling apart." "Don't diminish what you've accomplished," Aditya said. "Building something from nothing takes courage. It's harder than inheriting a legacy." Naina blinked, caught off guard by his honesty. "I didn't think you'd understand." Aditya's smile was faint but genuine. "There's a lot you don't know about me." She studied him for a moment. "Then tell me." Aditya hesitated. He wasn't used to sharing his personal life, but something about Naina made him want to open up. "My father is a difficult man. He demanded perfection in everything, business, family life. Growing up, I felt like I was always falling short of his expectations. And now?" Naina asked gently. "Now, I've built a life he respects," Aditya said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "But it doesn't feel like it's mine." Naina's chest tightened at his words. She had spent her entire life fighting for her dreams, refusing to let anyone dictate her path. Yet here was a man who had everything, wealth, power, status, and still felt trapped. "That's no way to live," she said softly. Aditya met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "I'm starting to realize that." Later that evening, as the dancers packed up for the day, Naina lingered in the hall, going over her notes one last time. She didn't notice Aditya approaching until he spoke. "You're still here," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. "I could say the same about you," she replied, glancing up. "I wanted to make sure everything was going smoothly," he said. "And I thought you might need a break." Naina raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering to help?" Aditya chuckled. "I wouldn't dare interfere with your work. But I have a better idea." Before she could protest, he gestured toward the door. "Come with me." Curious but cautious, Naina followed him. They left the building and walked a short distance to the rooftop garden of Singhania Towers. The city stretched out before them, a glittering expanse of lights and shadows. The air was cool, and the sound of distant traffic hummed below. "What are we doing here?" Naina asked, crossing her arms. Taking a moment, Aditya said simply. "Sometimes it helps to step away and look at things from a different perspective." Naina couldn't argue with that. She leaned against the railing, letting the cool breeze wash over her. For a moment, they stood in silence, the tension of the day melting away. Then impulsively Aditya turned to her. "Show me." "Show you what?" Naina asked, confused. "Teach me a step," he said, a rare playfulness in his tone. "I've watched you rehearse for weeks. I want to know what it feels like." Naina laughed, shaking her head. "You want me to teach you baritanidium? You, who barely seems comfortable tapping his foot to music." Aditya grinned. "Exactly. Come on, humor me." Still laughing, Naina stepped closer. "Fine. But don't blame me if you embarrass yourself." She positioned him in a basic stance, adjusting his posture with a mix of exasperation and amusement. Aditya followed her instructions with surprising earnestness, though his movements were far from graceful. Now try this, she said, demonstrating a simple sequence of hand and foot movements. Aditya attempted to mimic her, his brow furrowed in concentration. He stumbled, and they both burst into laughter. For a moment, the weight of their responsibilities disappeared, replaced by a shared sense of lightness. You're hopeless, Naina said, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. And you're a terrible teacher, Aditya countered, though his smile betrayed his teasing. As the laughter subsided, their eyes met, and the mood shifted. The city's distant lights reflected in Naina's dark eyes, and Aditya felt an ache he couldn't ignore. Slowly he reached out, his hand brushing hers. Naina's breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, her pulse quickening as she looked up at him. For a moment the world faded, leaving only the two of them beneath the starlit sky. Aditya's voice was barely a whisper. You make me forget everything else. And you make me question everything I thought I knew, Naina replied, her voice trembling. They stood there, caught in a moment neither of them wanted to end. But before it could deepen further, Naina took a step back, breaking the spell. I should go, she said, her voice unsteady. Aditya nodded, though his heart protested. Good night, Naina. Good night, she murmured before walking away, her steps quick and her thoughts racing. As Aditya watched her disappear into the night, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was falling for Naina Kapoor, and there was no turning back.